Hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Please give me some thumbs up if you can see us and hear us clearly. Just you can click the react button and gives us a thumbs up. I also have my colleague Marta. Maybe she can confirm if everything is okay. Just a thumbs up is enough.
Yeah, everything is okay.
Thank you so much, Marta. So, once again, good afternoon, everyone. This is a recorded session and the recording of the webinar has started. Thank you for joining this first webinar of the webinar series, Empowering Struggling Readers, offered by the European School Education Platform, the European Commission's platform for school education in Europe. My name is Maria Elena and I will be the hostess of this session. Once again, this is a recorded webinar and all the material will be uploaded on the European School Education Platform in the coming days. My colleague Marta has just shared with you a link where you will be able to find the presentation and the recording of this session. Before we begin, I would like to remind you of some very important technicalities. First of all, following the general data protection regulations, your microphones, as you can see, and your cameras have been disabled. However, we invite you to share any thoughts or questions through the chat. Also, we kindly ask you not to share any personal information during this session. Instead, you can use the Connect tab on the European School Education Platform for partner finding and collaborations. Moreover, I would like to introduce you to a very useful tool. It's the captions tool. With this tool, basically, you're able to add subtitles or live captions for this webinar. To do so, as you can see on your screens, hopefully, please click the button More at the bar on top of your screen. Then you can move to Language and Speech and click Live Captions. You can also install this function by going again to the button More, then click on Settings and turn on the captions in the Accessibility section. Of course, if you have any questions regarding this or any other technical issues, please let us know in the chat and we will come back to you as soon as possible with a reply. Since this is a webinar series, we would also like to remind you of some important steps toward obtaining a certificate. So, our webinar series, this is the how-to guide, how to successfully complete it. As you can see, in order to obtain a certificate, you need to register and join for both webinars of the webinar series. Please note that you also need to register for the webinars, not just enroll on EU Academy and on the European School Education Platform, but you also need to register for the webinars themselves, let's say. The first webinar is today, and we will talk about it soon. And the second webinar is on Thursday in 2 days. 3 days at 4 Central European Summertime as well. And if you want to obtain a certificate, you will also have to complete the final mandatory activity. It's a very short quiz that our guest speakers have prepared for you. Please make sure to fill it in before the deadline. As you can see, the deadline to submit is on Friday before midnight, and the quiz will be available after the ending of the second webinar, which is on Thursday. As you can see here, we will open the quiz, the final activity, on Thursday, 8th of May, after 5 in the afternoon, in the evening. So please pay close attention to the guidelines if you wish to obtain a certificate. I think, yeah, that's all. Maybe we can proceed with the main part of this session. For this webinar, we have invited Professor Stephanie Jacques. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Stephanie. Stephanie is a research associate at the University of Cologne at the department, for special education, where she leads the Research Center for Literacy and Inclusion. Today with Stephanie, we will discuss about emergent literacy and the essential role of meaningful participation in print-related activities. Of course, she will tell us more about this, and during this session, we will explore the different functions of print comprehension and comprehensive instruction for all children, including those with special learning abilities. So, with no further delays, and if there are no questions relevant to the technicalities of this webinar. Stephanie, you can share the screen. The floor is yours. Yes, it works perfectly. We can see it, Stephanie.
Hello, Europe. As teachers, we need to regularly ask ourselves, what do you focus on? What do you focus on when we think about the literacy development? And what is this focused based on or influenced by? Before I focus today on literacy, emergent literacy, and comprehension, I want to zoom out a bit. I want to zoom out and look at the whole picture. What is in front of my inner eye or now on the slides when we talk about literacy development, just as a sketch. Now, down here, you see that our teacher knowledge is influenced by years of teacher training at the universities, by professional development, by our own experiences in the classroom, by what we read and hear. All of this is influencing our focus. When we look at literacy development, then I think of it as a literacy continuum based on the work of Karen Erickson and David Koppenhaber. And that means it starts early when we read with the children, but it continues. Literacy development continues up until, into adulthood. Like when I teach my university students how to read scientific papers or how to write scientific papers, or it might be important for new teachers to learn how to write an individual education plan. So we are learning how to read and write better and how to read and write different texts in different contexts and so on. So now back to the question, what do you focus on? When I went to university in Germany to get my teacher education, and German is a very transparent language. That means that the letter-sound correspondences are rather regular. So it's rather easy compared to English. It's rather easy to learn to read and write words. So we had a very strong focus on words. Also, from today's point of view, I would say it was maybe a bit too narrow. It was very narrow because there's so much more to reading and writing development. So when we talk about learning to read and write, we look at so much more than just learning to read and write words. There's so much more to the topic. We talk about reading comprehension or how we support students to make reading a part of their everyday life. And this is difficult, isn't it? Especially today. So when some schools have decided to have those reading times where students have some time to read something that they've chosen themselves, then that's also a topic when we're looking at literacy development. Reading in everyday life. We might look at writing, communicative writing, writing and keeping the audience, having an idea on who I write to. It's very similar to what I do today. The audience today are teachers, practitioners. My presentation would look very differently and I would talk differently if I would be at the research conference. This is also a topic when we're looking at literacy development. Another topic is the reading and writing subject, how we support students to find their own voices, which kind of formulations to choose. So I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to focus on a couple of topics today, and I have this bit in the back of my mind. 3 topics today. The first one is comprehensive instruction, the whole picture, so to say. The second topic will be emergent literacy, looking at the earlier experiences. And then my third topic will be reading comprehension. So let's dive into it. I said I start off talking about comprehensive instruction. So comprehensive instruction means that when we talk about literacy instruction, we focus on several elements. It's important to focus on several elements, parts of reading and writing each and every day. And there are different recommendations what the elements can be, and you might know yours in your school, in your country. I want to give you 2 examples today. The first one is for comprehensive conventional literacy instruction. Now, with this visual sketch in mind, I'm looking at conventional literacy now, when children start reading words, writing words, using this letter sound connection, what we do in alphabetical languages. So this is an example from Karen Erickson's and David Koppenhaver's book, Comprehensive Literacy for All. And we used this at the Research Center for Literacy and Inclusion. It's one of the bases for our focus, because we have this focus on teaching all students, including those who have severe disabilities. So the recommendation for this comprehensive conventional literacy instruction is to have a focus on those 4 areas each day: reading comprehension, self-selected reading, finding what I like, read that for some time, writing, and this focus on words, working with words, decoding words, word ID, spelling. So with this structure in mind, you now decide, it's what you do every day, right? You decide what is your current focus. And it helps to have this clear focus. One of the things that is inspiring for me is when I read that book, Comprehensive Literacy for All, then it says, for example, when you're looking into writing and composing text, it says this: when we teach writing, we do not teach spelling while students are composing text. Then the focus is not on orthography. And this is something that might be a really huge help, because, as they say in the book, we do not want to interrupt the students' train of thought. Sometimes writing and the focus on spelling and words are looked at the same time, but having this clear focus, what your goals are, for example, in your writing block, when it's about getting ideas from your head onto paper, making a first draft, and then later on looking for spelling and orthography, that is one possible consequence to take from this. And I think this is really important when we talk about struggling readers. Many of them have problems or challenges with orthography. And by having this clear focus, then you could support that. Today it's about, or not today, we have the focus on each areas each day, but the focus is now on writing, getting a draft, getting your ideas, and everything else we take a bit later on. So one example for comprehensive instruction for conventional literacy, but in this book, you will also find one for comprehensive emergent literacy instruction. So if you read English, check with comprehensive literacy for all. I would like to also introduce you to one that my colleagues Melanie Wilke and Sally Kröger developed when we were working with inclusive preschool and kindergarten classrooms. We had the task to support people preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers, help them to start to implement some literacy ideas. And our comprehensive idea was also 4 parts: reading, and I mean shared reading, guided reading, self-directed reading. We would read a lot, but also in everyday life. Don't just think of books. Think of when we would see a sign or we would take a note or something. And we had to read that later. All of those reading activities were the focus. We had a focus on writing, scribbling, shared writing, communicative writing, and we are in the early phases here. There's a consequent focus on print, and what we do in those early phases by those with these activities is we provide experiences with print, meaningful experiences with print. And for those, the interaction between the adult and the child are maybe the most important. How we invite the children when we are looking where to put their shoes, because we need to find the name of the child. And we point out where the name is. We talk about the name and the first letter. We have this focus on the ABC, on letters, on words. What we did was we created something like a calendar where we were collecting a couple of ideas. So you could, for example, start by writing yourself into a list that you're there in the morning. And this was something that was first a challenge, because many people thought you have to be able to write your name, to hold a pen and so on. But no, you can start to scribble. We can support the children that they do this. So that was one of those examples for a comprehensive instruction for emergent literacy. While in this preschool and kindergarten project, it was about creating the routines or rituals of reading and writing in everyday life situations. It was not like you would do it at school. Yet, such a comprehensive emergent literacy instruction is really relevant when we teach children with significant disabilities at school. Then we want to do every part, every day, very similar to what I said earlier about comprehensive conventional literacy instruction. If the term emergent literacy is not so used to you, here is some definition. It is the reading and writing behaviors and those understandings, those insights that precede conventional literacy and that develop into conventional reading and writing. So it's all of those moments. I already mentioned some. When we use print because we read a sign, we read the schedule for today, we read the menu. It's about communication when I'm saying who I'm writing a message to with my mobile or when I'm reading something. It's when I'm taking a note because we might need to write a birthday card to Jens, who had his birthday. We also read for pleasure. We read books. We might read rhymes each day. So those experiences are critical for all readers. And what you see when I'm talking about this focus with the focus on interaction and all of those moments, then you see it's not just about skills. It's about experiences. It's about understanding, comprehending why we use prints. We call this the functions of prints. And it's about participation. Inviting the children when we are reading, when we are writing, why we write something on the shopping list. We might also give this tip to parents that if the child wants something, whether the child gets it or not is a different question. But this idea of something is missing at the breakfast table, let's write it on the shopping list and make it so that the children see it. We want to provide those models. And again, our focus, children with disabilities. Now, if the child might have a visual impairment, then the tip might be to use felt tip pens or eddings so that you see how you leave a mark, because then children can imitate what writing looks like or what reading looks like if we are later checking when we're shopping what we need and what we already have. So when I'm talking to teachers, when I'm talking to parents about struggling readers, it's one of my first questions. Did he or she make many meaningful experiences with print? And if those are elder students, then it's the same question. Were there reasons to find songs on Spotify, to talk about who you want to write to, who you want to meet, and so on? Those are meaningful experiences with print, which help motivation, which help interest or support interest. And I think it is so clear that the focus is away from learning to read and having the focus on the technical side. It's about experiences, why print is important. Therefore, I think every teacher, every future teacher should know about emergent literacy. And I provide you 2 visuals, if that might be helpful, to spread the word. The first one is a side-by-side comparison of reading readiness, the more traditional focus, and then emergent literacy. It might help, I wrote some of those notes on the slides. It might help to think of reading readiness, to think a bit of a skills-based or focus on prerequisites. Children have to be ready for literacy instruction. They have to show certain skills. And reading readiness thinks of a kind of a progression of sequential steps. So it might mean, and that is a problem for special education, if you adapt the reading readiness perspective, then you might think that phonological awareness is the prerequisite before we offer words, before we write name tags that only have the name on it. It's this idea of first this and then this. And the third point here is this focus on form, on technical, on the words. That is something that you find in the literature when you're looking for the reading readiness perspective. On the other hand, emergent literacy, the focus is on these experiences, not on prerequisites. All children are ready to read and write. And it's about the opportunities, experiences, insights, what I can do with print, why it might be a good idea to take a note or write something on that shopping list, because we have this focus on both function, why we use print, and form. So that's the first slide that I think every teacher, every future teacher should see. And then the second one is the emergent literacy model, which is a model from 1986. And I told you before, we had a strong focus on words when I went to university. I did not learn about the emergent literacy model then. Okay, 4 central sentences here. These skills to listen and understand, to speak, or to use alternative means of communication if you cannot speak, to read and write, they develop interactively. No one is more important than any other. No one precedes any other. So it's not the idea of something like a stage model. Students develop literacy skills through active engagement with the world. There are no prerequisites. Progress begins when learning opportunity begins. And the functions of print are as important as forms. So we can draw a couple of consequences from this. Some of them you might find in this report from an expert group on literacy. The report is on effective practices for literacy teaching. And I thought you might rather not see one of the more slides, so you get a little to-do list now from me if you want to. So a couple of recommendations or to-dos for us in everyday life. We need to provide those meaningful experiences for all children, for all teenagers, for all adults, if we are working with adults and having this focus on literacy. We should start with this comprehensive instruction idea, provide experiences in all those different areas from kindergarten. We use print in the environment. We might even use books without text. That is something that is one of the recommendations from the report. That could be something if the children do not speak the language of the institution at home. Then if we provide them with books where they have to read German or Swedish or Albanian or something, then it might be difficult for them when they are going home. So we want to provide books without text. That's an option for them to have this shared reading experience, looking at the books and enjoying to browse through it. But it does not have to be books. It can be using the print in the environment. Rhyme cards can be an idea. And it says ESL as a little reminder for me to talk about those students who might speak English as second language. So that's why rhyme cards, books without text. A couple of ideas, because it's important when we teach at the university, not to stop here where we say, please do this, please do that. We have to really have a focus on how to do it. So I want to dive in a bit. How can we do it? Use the print and the environment was one of the tips. So some strategies are show the children where you read, especially the young children. Use the finger, print referencing, if you read something that is in the environment. Two amazing examples here from Sweden. I live in Sweden, so those are parts of my everyday life. There is a weekly newspaper, especially for children and teens, and I'm just so amazed because I think they find a graphic tone, they find topics that are really interesting. So when you have this one in your classroom or at home, it's always inviting to browse through. You will always find a topic to talk about or something you want to point out or read with the children or read yourself. Another great example here, one of the milk companies regularly always has one side of the milk package. There are recipes or quizzes or some information. It's such a great idea. You know, you sit at the breakfast table and somehow you start reading, you talk about that quiz or that recipe. So we use that print, we show where we read, we use think alouds. We might do this when we read stories. Oh, this reminds me of something. But we also do think alouds in everyday situations. I mentioned before how we together search for where the name is and where the shoes go in school or in kindergarten. I do this thinking loud. Oh, well, let's look, where is it? I search with my finger so that children can imitate that. So I'm providing models. I wonder what you have in your school, in your country, what you can use, what your first ideas are. It's about using those options. All right, a summary for this first part on emergent literacy. All of those experiences, they help building a foundation for conventional literacy. It's important experiences for motivation, insights, skills, interests, self-image. The children perceive themselves as competent. And those experiences with this wide variety of formats and topics and topics to read about and reasons to write, they influence the identities as readers and writers. Because it's not our job to make the students read. It's our job to make them want to read. That is one of the goals that we have to talk about books a bit by the side, sometimes a bit informal, but so that the children don't even realize I might want to give a new book or some recommendations or show them how I can take a note or how I can write a card in a different way or something. We need to provide the models because the focus is to help them to want to read, to want to write. Now, we are moving on towards conventional literacy here. The PISA definition, reading literacy, again, it's not about reading words, about spelling, orthography only. Those are important. Please don't get me wrong. Those are important. Those are central skills. And when I'm today not focusing on it, I'm not saying they are not important. Really not. They are central. And there is more. I'm not saying do more of this and less of this. Not at all. Comprehensive, all those elements are important. So this is something always very important to point out. If you use again a summary on the PISA definition where it's about understanding text, reflecting on text, using text to achieve your goals, to develop your knowledge and potential, to participate in society, you can talk about it's about the competent use of print. Competent use of print, not just being able to read long texts and understand everything. It's about this everyday life, reading different documents, because we do this every time, every day. And we do it often with a specific purpose. Let's use this word purpose to move on to the next topic, reading comprehension. So reading comprehension means that we integrate, while we read, we integrate what we know about the world, we integrate what we know about text structures, because we expect different information in a recipe than in a newspaper, than when I read Harry Potter, maybe. So it's this integration of world knowledge, what I know about the text structures, about the functions, and the text content. It's really much more than understanding the meaning of individual words. So make sure that the materials you use to support reading comprehension are not just on a word level or having words and pictures, mapping those together. When we're talking about reading comprehension, we want to support the students that they understand things that are not in the text. So when you read, she slammed the door, we have an assumption of what happens. She is angry, but it doesn't say that in the text. So it's about this constant idea of changing the situation, the model you have in your head. And I mentioned Harry Potter. I'm hoping I'm not spoiling something for somebody listening today. You know, when we read the third book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, it's one of my favorite books from the Harry Potter series. The Prisoner of Azkaban, we know a prisoner, maybe be careful. And for a long time when we were reading, we thought Sirius Black was the enemy. We had this idea. And then we keep reading and we change that situational model. Reading comprehension is, to me personally, a very important topic because I've met so many students who struggle with it. That's why I always think it's interesting to learn more about what is it we are talking about and how can we help students to comprehend better. So a couple of things before we dive into the how can we help question. It's helpful to look at those terms, written language comprehension. So written language comprehension is the ability to understand written language, either when you're reading yourself or when you listen to somebody reading. So when I read to my group, when we read chapter books each day a bit, then I'm supporting their written language comprehension. It's not so easy to understand this written language because it's the formulations are a bit different. And that is why what we do often in emergent literacy, when we read texts, we read them and then we tell what it says. And somehow I'm still doing this with my university students. We read some maybe really difficult studies, and then I might explain to them, what does it say? Why is this important? Please look out for this and that. Written language comprehension, either you read yourself or somebody is reading text to you. Silent reading comprehension is the ability to understand written language when you read silently. Those are our goals, both of them. Now, how do we teach reading comprehension? Silent reading comprehension, it's influenced by many factors. Some of them are decoding, reading fluency, written language comprehension. Sometimes you find a perspective in the literature where it seems like, and this is one perspective and I have another one, but one is you first have to master decoding. Then we will help you getting more fluent in your reading, that you read with a certain pace, and then we focus on reading comprehension. And the recommendations today are that you start to support comprehension rather early. It's not this thought that you first have to read fluently, because it's not very motivating either if it's not about what you read, but that you read fast. So something that we find in the literature are quotes like this: reading comprehension is not automatic, even when fluency is strong. So those are important things for us to know. We want to support all the different elements and an early support of comprehension. Now, you might pay attention to that I'm sometimes saying reading comprehension and then only comprehension, and it's because the silent reading comprehension is when I'm reading it myself. But before I can technically read myself fluently, you can help me to understand texts better. So that's why we do this early. And there are even differences in the different languages. For example, not to go too deep into this, but you know, there are more transparent languages where letter-sound connections are rather constant or they are easier. And then English, for example. So German is a rather transparent orthography, and English is more difficult. What does that mean? If a German child learns to read first grade, it helps to use what the child knows about letter and sound correspondences. And by this, it can figure out it says banane or it says lesen or something like that. In English, by just using what you now know about letter sound correspondences, you might not get to the word you need in the sentence because, for example, the word read, and then read a book, it might be I read a book. Yesterday, I read a book. So in English, children need to learn earlier to have a focus on the content, the context. That's the word I wanted to say. The context, they have to have the whole sentence in mind. Whereas German children, just to make it a bit simpler than it is, they can read word by word. And this is a trade-off. There are advantages because you are faster in German to get to the point where you can read those individual words. But English children, in this example, they learn earlier to see the whole sentence, to use the content, and to have this focus on comprehension. In transparent orthographies, it's therefore important to support that too early. And a second interesting thing here is that listening comprehension, so when somebody reads to you, is directly related to reading comprehension. And this is even increased when the reading skills develop. So what that means is we need to read connected texts, and not just non-fiction books, also science books and biographies maybe, and something from a newspaper if you have something like the one I showed before. Listening comprehension is something that we really want to support. another to-do list. If you are a person like me, I love to-do lists. What should we do? What are the recommendations? So we need to start early and have this ongoing focus on teaching reading comprehension or comprehension and reading comprehension. We should always read with a clear focus. We should model how to apply the strategies. I will show you in a second. And we need to make sure we teach comprehension and not just test it. So again, I will not stop here where I say this is what we should do, but also how we should do it. So we should read with the children early. So let's go back in time to the emergent literacy times. I said we do shared reading and we do guided reading. Shared reading, we read together books or texts, what is interesting for the children. And shared reading means that we can talk about each page. We follow the students' lead, the questions they have, the things they comment. That is our focus when we do shared reading. So I, as the teacher, need to know beforehand whether today I want to do some shared reading activity or guided reading activity. So when we do guided reading, then we read with a really clear purpose. We say before we read what we want to focus on today. While we read, I might refer back to that. And then afterwards, we might check whether we have a good idea to our question. And we read the same book or story or biography, often several times. This is rather natural when we talk about emergent literacy. Books we bring, we reread them. Some children love certain books so much we read them maybe more often than we would love to. So let's have a look at a couple of some purposes. A good purpose helps you to focus your attention, and a good purpose requires you to process nearly the entire text or a bit longer. It's not just one question to answer. So one might be to attend to the heading. What does the title say? Do you have some ideas? What could this be about? The Prisoner of Azkaban. What do we expect? We could make some predictions, and we can do this early. We could do this each time we take a new book, we take a new journal, we take the newspaper and look into certain articles. We might together identify the idea or the problem, compare and contrast. We do this together in the beginning, guided practice. And it says in the literature, without a purpose, the teacher is not teaching the student how to comprehend better. Just a short example. I'm a huge fan of the work of Elizabeth Gilbert, and I was at a lecture from her. And in this context, I was talking to a friend about her book, Eat, Pray, Love. And then the assumptions of my friend were, Eat, Pray, Love, oh, it's one of those self-help books where somebody says you need to eat, you need to pray, you need to love. And then we could talk about it. And when I'm now reading you one of the lines from the first page, it's a woman's search for everything. And then when you read on the back side, then you help adjust what you assumed first. And those strategies are strategies of competent readers. It's not the idea that you know that competent readers know this beforehand. It's about figuring it out together, use those strategies, be aware, monitor your comprehension, all of this. With the children, just to give you one short example, we could read with a purpose, and we could look for a good title for this book. This is a book I know in both Swedish and German, and I've seen that there is no English translation yet. So I could ask the students, what could be a really good title for this book? Who thinks it could be Our Schoolyard? Who thinks it could be Some Love It, Some Don't? Who thinks a good title could be The Whole? and then we read the book, or we read this description today here now with this short amount of time, I could read Emma Atboge's beloved book about a pit behind a school gymnasium. Everybody loves the pit, except the adults. They hate the pit. In the classroom, we would read the whole book. We would look, I would translate, I would explain, and then we could talk about what would be a good idea. And we can do this activity with books we have to, but then there's one important tip. The 3 titles you choose, none of them should be the real title, because reading comprehension instruction is not about guessing the right answer. It's about supporting thinking before, during, and after you read. If you're interested, the German title is Unsere Grube. So we need to ask ourselves, do we really teach reading comprehension? One more example here. I have a teeny tiny text for you. If you read it yourself, I might support you do silent reading comprehension. My question is here, what's an ampersand? Why I use the ampersand? I like using the ampersand. It's a great element for some intentional and not just illustrative background sign. And it's a beautiful way to connect words. I was not teaching you ampersand before we read our teeny tiny text here, because what I want to support is that you learn to use strategies, not to understand the text today better, but to learn strategies how to understand texts in the future better. So when we teach comprehension, this is one of the questions we have to ask ourselves. Is the focus, and all those goals are okay goals, we just have to be aware about it. Is the goal to help students to understand the text we are working with today better? Or is the focus that we help the students to implement those strategies and use them wisely so that they can read better in the future? We need to model how to apply those strategies. And this we should do with future teachers at the university, because it's not so easy to apply this. And I said it before, many university students, they know really well how to test assessment, how to assess it by asking questions after you've been reading, by questions, where there's a very proper right and wrong. And we support reading comprehension. We need to show how we do that. All right, so reading comprehension, important. We need to model those strategies. And if all of this is rather new to you, a good starting point might be that word purpose. Read with a purpose. Talk about that, whether you work with students in the area of emergent literacy or conventional literacy, and then the instruction of reading comprehension. Now, talking about purpose, talking about personal goals and personal focus, I want to round up here when we are talking about empowering struggling readers. Why is the topic of literacy important to me? As I said, my focus is on children, on teenagers and adults with disabilities, most of them with severe disabilities. Many are not able to hold a pen or to speak. Many use alternative means of communication, like my colleague and friend, Katrin Klapper. Please meet Katrin.
Hello. You're up. Hello, you're up.
my short way of introducing you to Katrin, a doctoral student, a friend, a colleague. She's an author, a speaker at national and international conferences, engaged in politics, a globetrotter, employer, a wife. While we have this focus at the Research Center for Literacy in, Research Center and Inclusion. Now I said it wrong. Before I finish that sentence, I want to read you a bit of a text from Katrin that she wrote a couple of years ago. Written language is my mother tongue. Before her wedding, her name was Katrin Lemler. To begin, I'd like to quote my partner. I wouldn't have fallen in love with you if you couldn't write. It's only through written language that your personality truly comes through. My partner captured the significance of written language for people without speech. Written language provides an entirely unlimited vocabulary. Today, I can express anything exactly the way I want to. Written communication is fundamentally different from symbol-based communication. As a child, I often used bliss symbols, and while I could technically express anything, I could never say it exactly in my own words. For example, I would have preferred to say I'm going home, but only had the word house. On average, I had to substitute at least one word in every sentence. This influenced not only my language, but ultimately my personality. Only through written language I was able to express my personality in my own words. Today I can say written language is my mother tongue. Without it, I would not be able to express myself at my current linguistic level, and I would still be frequently underestimated. So, as I said, at the Research Center for Literacy and Inclusion, we have this focus on children, adolescents, and adults with disabilities. Most with severe disabilities, and many where the disabilities influence their cognitive skills and understandings of the world. For a long time, many of the students did not have access to high quality and comprehensive literacy instruction. So, together with more and more teachers in Europe and beyond, we are working to change that. Talking today about empowering struggling readers, we have this focus on high quality comprehensive instruction for all students. Why? Literacy has an impact on each and every life, on personal development, on the quality of life, on love, as we saw, on everything. So therefore, all you teachers, your work is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I would like to take a few minutes to thank you for presenting such an interesting topic, for analyzing what the emergent literacy basically is and all the components, from reading comprehension to the prints and everything that supports students to supports their writing, supports their even their speech in some cases, and their understanding, of course, behind the words, as you said. I would like to ask now our audience if there are any questions relevant to the presentation, something that you would like to share, maybe something from your own experiences. And until you do so, maybe I can address a question to you, Stephanie. So, during the webinar, during the presentation, you mentioned that there are like a lot of students struggling with reading comprehension. What is, in your opinion, based on your experience, based on literature maybe that you have read, what is the main reason behind these difficulties students have, even in like older ages, not just from the kindergarten, for example, when they first start learning?
Not an easy question to answer. Maybe a combination of experience with the different texts and that somebody helps them use those strategies that they, in the best case, are familiar with from early on. So that's why it is so important that we are not just starting to teach those strategies when you are third grade or fifth grade, but that when you start reading by yourself, you have all the time thought before you take a letter, before you start reading, you have some questions, you are aware of your assumptions of what you know about a protocol or a recipe and something. So a combination of experiences with the different texts, of reading those different texts with certain purposes, and for some time, a good guided practice.
Well, that's a very useful reply to a difficult question. Because I feel that many people, many teachers might have this question, why this might be happening, how can we solve and tackle this issue from the root? You know what I mean. And one last question to close, coming again from me. Sorry, I'm super curious about this topic.
Oh, great.
So basically, we have experienced in the past some, we have heard some questions regarding parental involvement, because reading, comprehension, writing, everything, they can also are some skills that can be further developed at home, for example. Do you have any tips, maybe 1, 2 tips that you could share on how teachers could achieve this collaboration with the parents so that they can support their children as parents, support their children to enhance their comprehension, for example? Maybe a couple of tips.
Absolutely. So from an early age, I think parents here way too much read books, and do this. And I think that this is very one-sided. From early on, we should help parents to give them tips how they do this awareness of print, using print in everyday life. So tips like the shopping list, tell your child when you're reading a message to grandma or something, or when you write a card for birthday, when you read the invitation, when you're looking into the TV program, when the child's preferred program is, do this, but using this strategy of thinking aloud, because all of this helps and builds this foundation. And then later on, it's about those interactions. It's not so much about sitting by yourself. It's difficult to get there for many. One tip can be, at times, this is not a general tip, to use simpler text to read with comprehension. But don't do this always. It's not like you should always read simpler.
It's a small tip. It's a small tip, and this will also help the, let's say, the interaction between parents and children. So they're not just passive. Let's say they are not just passively accepting the information coming from the parents. As you said, read the text to your grandma, read the invitation,
And then
etc.
explain. Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, of course, go ahead, please.
And then explain it with your own words. Explain how you think. Explain why you have the question, why you think this, how you refer, how you take what you know about what's presumably in the newspaper, or what you know about this kind of text structure. Yeah.
So let's say use small everyday life situations
Yes.
to help them, yes, develop some skills further. Of course, that's a very nice and useful tip, I think. And with this interesting tip for parental involvement and parent interaction between children and parents, and of course teachers, I think we can close this session. But before we leave you for today, we would like to remind you of some upcoming learning events on the European School Education platform. As you can see on your screens, we have some upcoming webinars. We have our online courses that, of course, after their completion, we turn them into a self-paced format. So if you have missed any of the short courses, feel free to revisit them. You are still able to obtain a certificate for those courses after you complete the self-paced format. And we also have an online tutorial running. It's a new format. We hope that you will enjoy it. And I think we can close now our session here. As we mentioned in the chat, feel free to address any questions to the help desk if you are facing any issues with the registration or with the certificate. A kind reminder that if you want to obtain a certificate, you need to attend both webinars, the webinar of today and the webinar on Thursday. And of course, complete the final activity that our speakers have prepared for you, Stephanie and Rena, who you will meet on Thursday. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed this session and I hope you took something important with you today. Sorry, one last question coming from Corina. The link for the webinar on Thursday is different. You will be able to find it on EU Academy. We have shared all the links with you. If you can scroll up in the chat, you will find everything there. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for your time. Thank you for accepting our invitation to present the first webinar of our webinar series for struggling readers. And we will see you all on Thursday. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.